Thank you, Mr. Arora. That was very comprehensive. First of all, I must compliment you for not going into numbers. It's refreshing to hear a government official and policy maker and not talk about number and yet convey the whole story, which you have done, sir, very comprehensively. Let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, those of you who know me that I'm not known for my ability to flatter people in high places. If anything, I'm notorious for my ability to be not flattering to people in high places. But there is something that I would like to say today about Secretary Arora. You know, when he mentioned that in television licensing regime was a bit of a challenge, and he has issued many more licenses, I think he was stating only half the truth. The fact of the matter is that in the almost last 3 years before he took over, not a single license was issued. And the implications of this you can imagine. You can't probably imagine if you're not from the world of television. Even if you wanted to change the name of your own channel with the same content, with everything remaining the same, you still needed a license with all the attendant clearances, and that was not happening. And it's a fact that all of us, people like Sudhanshu, myself, and anybody who had a small broadcasting business, had to spend a lot of time just making the rounds of Shastri Bhavan, and we don't need to do that, simply because licenses just happen. And you know, we don't even get to know that when our teams applied for a license and it happened. So there is certainly, you know, it's not a question of efficiency that's come into the ministry since he joined. There is, from complete inaction and stalemate, there is movement. And that's, to those of us who've been at the receiving end of it, it's a very, really big deal. He is also someone who has very clear views on things. You know, he doesn't always agree. And I would like to start with that. If that's okay, sir, we'll spend some time talking about things with you, and then I would like to ask a few people from the audience also to ask a question or two if they have that. First thing I would like to ask you, you have had a very interesting career where, you know, it's only for the last 1 year, besides the tenure at the state level, you're formally involved with media and entertainment, or information and broadcasting. But you've always been very, very close, you know, very, very involved in the media business. You've always made news, so to speak. You've done some really high-profile assignments, and you've done them successfully. So what was your impression when you first, of this whole world of media and entertainment? Because I see an interesting dichotomy. We all like to see this world as media and entertainment, and government sees this world as information and broadcasting. So it is something that has always baffled me, that we don't even have a common nomenclature. You know, if you go to telecom, if you go to finance, if you go to any other sector, that's not the case. How did you see this world when you were coming in? As media and entertainment or information and broadcasting? And what were your first impressions about the health and condition of the industry?
My first interaction with media at a personal level started when I was in the aviation for 5 years. In fact, we also met around that time. That time he was in the news. Well, why the historical name continues as information broadcasting is something you have already registered. And the ministries have been named. For example, if you have Ministry of Commerce, you cover a whole lot of activities, hundreds of activities. You can't say it should be called leather, iron ore, steel, 100 odd items or things which commerce is dealing with. So you always have generic names, but nevertheless the point is well taken. My own sense of media has always been, especially the news part, that no system, that by very nature, news, if not antithetical of the system, would always be skeptical of the system, which is the raison d'etre of democracy, and which is how it should be. Because unless the news part is skeptical of any given system, the news part cannot progress or go ahead in a democracy, because they are always kind of forewarning the system as to the pitfalls ahead. But at the same time, I just kind of gave 5, 6 instances from the podium to kind of, without giving any judgmental opinion, but at the same time leaving the judgment, for example, to you, as to how do you think about that. So, in case you have any thoughts about what I said, I would want you to kindly articulate and the audience to listen.
He's trying to put me on the spot, but I shall try to be as honest and as clever as I can be. I think Secretary Arora answered part of the problem with news in his address. And it's also refreshing that he's one of the first secretaries in many years that I've seen who has understood the challenge of news, not just is the challenge of content, but it's the challenge of the entire economics of news broadcasting. And therein lies the fundamental problem. As he himself was mentioning, that it's very difficult for standalone news channels because news on its own has a really is a really small business. It doesn't get watched by as many people who as is drama or television or films or sports. And on top of that, if news has very poor ability to get subscription income and has to rely almost entirely on advertising income, then it comes under a pressure which is totally unbearable. And that is what has destroyed the economics of news. The content side is, because their economics is challenged, their ability to pay in talent, which is the only input raw material that goes into news, is really challenged. Till about 20 years ago, all the senior news people that you see either in print or in TV were people from liberal arts and humanities who did not have many job opportunities. If they failed to make it to the civil services like Secretary Arora did, they had only 2 options, either become a teacher or go into journalism. Today, that community has, liberal arts graduates have huge opportunities. They can go and do many things. So, and news, if it has to step up its creativity and content game, it has to be able to pay for that. And they don't have the capacity. After the establishment cost and cost of carriage, etc., the advertising income is barely enough to meet the operating costs. And therein lies a huge problem, sir. The second problem is that, as you yourself said, and that's again refreshing to hear, that you're saying that news should always be antithetical or at least should have healthy skepticism. And
I said skeptical.
Skeptical.
I didn't say antithetical.
Okay, skeptical. Should have a healthy skepticism about the system, which is a fair way of looking at it. The problem is that when people are not able to come with great ideas, and when they're struggling, great ideas that may not pay today, but will build huge equity and credibility tomorrow, then they start doing tactical things. And news is a huge challenge. I said in my keynote address that it's become not just a subject of national discussion, it's a subject increasingly of national outrage, which, as you keep reminding me, is a matter of deep sorrow to someone like me who's had a deep background in news. Do you really think that the problem, Mr. Arora, of news can be solved without solving the problem of the business model of broadcasting?
You see, ultimately, let's, giving an analogy from aviation, which I know slightly more or claim to know slightly more. You see the first wave of liberalization. Most of the airlines which opened at that time, they collapsed. One by one. Initially they were doing well. There's no need of taking names, they collapsed. And post the second wave of liberalization, most of them, except the homegrown Richard Bransons, are doing very well, exceptionally well. Some have become iconic for their on-time performance, some for their service, some for both. Ultimately, the challenge which the system and the business and the entrepreneur which together have to decide is, for example, in aviation, you have issues of huge operating costs, which are far more in many countries than others. In your industry, the issues could be, which you have been raising from on various fora, of various fees, etc., whether registration, licensing, and all that. But at the end of the day, it will have to be decided whether the business goes by market principles or the business, the hand-holding part is done by the government. And then after our hand has been held, we say, now we will do as you like. Can the both go together? That's something which, as I said, there can be instant coffees, but not instant answers to such complicated questions. But at the same time, this issue that where the hand-holding stops, because let's face the facts, conscious intervention of the government where required should be done and ought to be done. But at the same time, to expect the government to be running any business for anybody, that is not possible.
Just one last question on news, and then we'll move to other sectors. You very rightly said that you can't expect the government to hold your hand and then run your business for you. But a lot of people today come in news.
I'm sorry, I said
and then
government, wherever government intervention minimally required
should be done.
Can and ought to be done, but at the same time, government cannot be expected to be running a business for somebody.
Absolutely. And my question is on that only. A lot of people today, India, incidentally, sir, has one of the highest numbers of news channels anywhere in the world. And one of the reasons a lot of people come in news is because of the so-called ancillary benefits that it brings to news. Do you think that's something that needs to be fixed?
I don't know what you mean by ancillary benefits, but I presume that it means that it kind of subserves as a camouflage for your business interests. You didn't say it plainly, because ultimately you are a very seasoned person. I am not that seasoned. So I am saying it very plainly, right? Now for then, I would ask you a counter question again. Then what are you doing, what you gentlemen are doing through your industry bodies? If you are aware of the fact that if government kind of comes down heavy on that, it will be government intervention. It will be then, why is government stopping such channels to come? I am aware of, if not bootleggers, distillers opening channels, as you are, tall text people, no disrespect to any tall text person, diversifying into channels. We're all aware of that. It was even discussed in the last parliamentary committee, and some very senior honorable members of parliament, especially one or two who are iconic media persons also, they raised this issue, as you have raised, and very rightly so. But I think besides, you could always have cap on investments would not do, because such people as you are talking, they do have deep pockets. What would really do be to make your industry bodies far more harsh towards such fringe elements who are trying to subserve and their business interests via news channels.
You made your point, sir. That's loud and clear. Now coming to the area of films. As you said, that one of the key concerns is theatre and the number of screens that are available in this country. And that number is scary sometimes. Whatever additions have happened, they have happened largely because single screens turning into multiplexes. And this is one sector where there is enormous potential in this country. One, the domestic market itself is so huge. And there is no reason to believe why India cannot be a big global player in this sector. Do you think infrastructure is something that is choking this industry and will continue to be so? Because given the real estate prices and issues around that and taxation on top of it, Do you think India can ever break out of this logjam of logistical limitations?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, I know China has a different set of conditions they work under. They have, the government has more power to do certain things. But the way they have grown over the last 5-10 years in density of screens, the same cannot be done here because the moment the government makes up its mind over there, they can just go ahead. You have to go through certain processes. And so is it, this is a problem for all of us. Growth at the, as they say, the window. At the window, if the window is so large, then every aspect of the business grows. So I think all efforts that are put into this are going to bear fruit for the whole industry, whole country, because there'll be more employment, there'll be more, I'm sure you are all very well aware of that also. And compared to China, we're way, way behind in the number of screens. So we really do need a lot of help in this, not only by way of promoting our cause to the other ministries, whether it's the finance or the land or infrastructure development side, but we really think that this is the biggest thing that needs to be done.
Much as we respect any successful economic model, be it China, be it Korea, be it any Asia-Pacific country, at the same time, there would always be comparison only between apples and apples and not between apples and oranges. But our Prime Minister has made it very clear more than once on public fora as well as in meetings of secretaries that wherever there is a good practice, we need to replicate. We need not reinvent the wheel. On the infrastructure side, there is again prioritization of infrastructure. And our perception of all of us could have and have a right to have a different view about whether the prioritization of the system is the best prioritization or that there should be alternate prioritization. The prioritization could comprise of more funds for education, more funds for health, more funds for roads, more funds for agriculture, so on and so forth. The kitty is not unlimited. And there is always resistance to more taxation. In fact, the move is always towards rationalized taxation where the tax compliance is better. But yes, I fully am not kind of doing any diplomatics. I think we all need to collectively do far more in the context of enhancing the theatre density in the country.
If we can sort of combine it with the growth of other things as well, which it has in the past with like the malls. Malls then accommodated cinemas. If there is any other way of development like that, which encourages, while you're doing your other things which you need to do for infrastructure, this is added on to that, then it might, help to take it that much.
Rameshji, I fully agree with you, and we'll try harder. But as far as the theatres are concerned, you will also realize, you would know much better than any of us here, that it underwent a kind of seesaw curve. You had some iconic theatres all over the country, most of them in Mumbai, for example. Yes, yes. Then in 70s or 80s, due to certain reasons which you would know better, you had people trying to kind of convert theatres into real estate and disposing them off. I remember that I started my job in Mount Abu, and a nice, small, good theatre. When I went back there 15 years later, I found it had been converted into a small shopping complex. After that, you have had the resurgence since late 80s and early 90s. Especially early 90s, the resurgence in the filmmaking has been very high. But yes, we need to keep pace, and we need to do more. And we need to do more together.
Thank you.
Now, Can I ask some people from the audience to take a few questions, sir? Sudhanshu, if you have any questions.
Mike?
Sir, very quick question from my end. You touched upon it. I think one of the characteristics of media and entertainment sector is that it changes very rapidly. In that context, our ability to draw policies and regulation, what is your thought on keeping it contemporary? Because that is one of the big challenges for a sector which is as dynamic as media and entertainment.
Actually, I would like to, there's always a gap between image and reality. And media entertainment sector is no different from that, by the way. Technology changes rapidly. But change of technology, for example, tomorrow's media is this. It's already today's media, it will be practically tomorrow's media totally. But change of technology doesn't necessarily mean that the content is changing at the same speed. Because ultimately, as you people would know better, as CP Saab would say, there was an old book written by Walter Allen about novel, English critic. And the first chapter was story. The second chapter was how the story is narrated. So when it comes to whether it is a good kind of soap opera or a good movie, the fundamentals haven't undergone much change. The presentation has undergone a change. The tools have undergone a change. You had a music being given by 7, 8, 10 people. Now you have a huge kind of setup doing the same. But the fundamentals don't change as rapidly. Yes, as far as technology is concerned, to keep pace with that technology, it's not just the Ministry of I&B, it is also the Ministry of IT and all others who are kind of keeping a constant track of it. And everybody is trying to keep pace with the changing times.
Yeah. Just 1 second. Can I first go to Farokh Balsara, the head of media and entertainment for Europe, Asia, and I don't know, many other parts of the world. Farokh, do you have a question from a business point of view?
Sir, how does the Ministry of I&B look at digital media, and what are the plans to further promote and accelerate that process?
Digital media, there are areas of synergy, there are areas of confusion. At the moment, I&B Ministry is totally kind of in sync with digital media. In fact, our NMCs and all, which we have created, are an attempt to keep pace with that. At the same time, a lot of things are being done which have a cascading effect on I&B policies from the IT side. But yes, and the present government, in any case, has also done one of the mission mode activities which has been announced, and not just announced, which is very seriously kind of being implemented, is the digital revolution or the digital mission, which essentially means clubbing the various subcomponents and sub-verticals of digital, harmonizing them into a synergetic whole and keep pace with it.
Gentleman there.
So there are a few questions, and...
No, please one, because we have a few more people and we're running
All right,
out.
I mean, the first question is that all the time, whenever the discussions are happening here, on one hand, we talk about free markets. On the other hand, I realize that all the time, certain concessions are being demanded from the ministry. Why is that? Why don't we have total faith in free markets? That's one question. The second one is that I&B ministry has many of these other organizations, including NFDC, Directorate of Film Festival, Films Division, CFSI. Now, these are vestiges of the socialist era, and they still continue to be part of INB ministry, and a lot of public funds, they are spent on these institutions. Is INB ministry thinking in terms of shutting them off? That is the second question.
I think the first question is to you.
Thank you very much. The first question he says is to me, and I couldn't agree more with you. The problem is that sometimes people go for concessions. Sometimes you're forced to go because unless the government gives those concessions, you cannot run your business. Now, sir, to the second question.
The second question was that NFDC, 3 or 4 organizations were named. NFDC, Films Division, CFSI, they are vestiges of what was said, old socialistic era. Well, these normative comments on socialistic era are your prerogative, and I can't take away your prerogative from you. NFDC in the current year has participated in one way or the other in the 3 national award-winning films. And I'm not saying this because I am Secretary INB. These are transient things. I've had a couple of meetings in NFDC. I would request that in one of my next meetings, you come with me. It is a group of some of the most versatile and brilliant people. Very, very creative. And ask Ramesh ji, I will not give those names, how many iconic directors of today started their spurs with NFDC in the last 15, 20 years, which is not the quote-unquote socialistic era.
Even more than that, sir. NFDC was set up when all these directors today have been born out of NFDC, most of them, and they made some very lovely films, very critically acclaimed films. That does not mean that a body like that becomes redundant or it is part of a socialistic era. I think even today it plays a very relevant part, as he said. Now I have chaired this year's National Film Awards, and I know the 3 of those films, and I didn't know when I was nominating the films that they belonged to NFDC. They were just discussed, and they were the best, and they were given the awards accordingly. So definitely the work being done by NFDC and these bodies it needs more encouragement. As a matter of fact, they need to, it had gone into some decline some years ago. In the last few years, it has picked up again and is doing a lot of wonderful.
And as far as concerned, for example, one new thing being started now is that besides the annual festival, they are going to have to start with a mini festival of a few days to start with in Delhi and Mumbai. That will be within a month or so. Plus, you should have come to Hyderabad and seen the overall enthusiasm for the children filmmaking and kind of products which are being made out. But I fully agree with you that some of the units need to be kind of rationalized, clubbed, merged. That exercise is under very, very active consideration, and it's a work in the making. To that extent, I fully agree with you.
We have run out of time. I'm sorry, but I don't have time for questions. But I just to wrap up, one last quick question, sir. Do you see this, and this is both as a very wise man and as the Principal Secretary of Information and Broadcasting, do you see that the winds of change in technology and world are so strong that a lot of discussion that we are having are already becoming irrelevant? We are talking about licensing issues, whereas somebody can go on the internet or YouTube and just launch a channel, 24-hour channel all by himself or herself without anything. So what Uber has done to regulation and regulated transport, what Airbnb is doing to regulation and the industry of hospitality, do you think a lot of that is already happening and we are fighting about a war that might have changed dramatically?
I don't know about the wise man part, you would know better, but even if you take Uber, it's one of, or Ola taxis. Do you think that the guy who is driving a taxi would be allowed to drive if he doesn't know driving? And that, and he would be allowed to drive only if he has, he knows driving under the so-called driving license rules. In fact, if you compare, for example, if you compare a traffic offense in India to a traffic offense in the US, in fact, they have leveraged technology and all that to that extent that in US or Canada, or for that matter, UK, losing your traffic license is almost next to, I mean, it's one of the worst things to have happened to you in life. And what is, I mean, they are kind of doing the regulatory part by using technological platforms. When I say that there should be less regulation, I mean it as a civil servant, wise or not, I mean it as a citizen. But at the same time, if you think that tomorrow somebody starts a channel on the internet and starts kind of saying something which goes against the security and sovereignty of the country, do you think the system would not intervene or should not intervene? It will never happen. I think, as I responded to Sudhanshu ji, that basically technology part has to, I mean, the regulation, as far as the regulation part is concerned, it has to keep in step with the changing times. But at the same time, irrespective of advancements, certain basic things would remain. By the way, why do you have so many, all your multinationals have a lobbying company in Washington? Why is it required?
Completely agree with
all
you.
the multinationals,
because they are still fighting about the old world.
No, it's not old world. The declarations, the statutory declarations are so minutely examined to ensure transparency. Tell me a single big manufacturing company which does not have an office in Washington and a lobbyist in Washington. Why is it so? We are technologically so advanced, we've gone to moon, Mars, everything should be abolished. I rest my case.
On that note, we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Arora. Ramesh ji.